Hey guys, it's NPC. So with the announcement of the Red Winter Federal Academy, let's go over the 2 new students that will be arriving soon. Before we get into the video, do me a favor. Click that subscribe button. Thanks. The first of the 2 we will be receiving is Mini Stall, and I mean Cherino. Cherino is a 3-star mid-striker. Her attack type is piercing and her armor type is light. Her weapon of choice is the handgun. Taking a look at her affinities, we can see that she is a D rank in indoors terrain, which will hinder her stats. She has an S rank in outdoor environments, which will give her many benefits, and she is neutral in urban territories with her B rank affinity. For her equipment, Cherino uses shoes, a badge, and a watch. Her equipment kind of shows what kind of character she's going to be. You can infer based on the shoes and the badge that she will be a more tanky style character and less of a DPS style character. Her handgun also helps boost this idea. So let's go take a look at her skills. Cherino's EX skill fires a flare, summoning students from the Red Winter School. These students then lift their weapons and deal a significant amount of area of effect damage around Cherino. While initially this EX ability looks like it's full screen, there's actually a pretty large circular range around Cherino. So technically it's not full screen, but it might as well be. Usually 7 cost EX skills are too expensive for my taste. However, this EX ability has its cost reduced to 6 at EX level 3 and further reduced to 5 at EX level 5. This means that the more you invest into Cherino, the better the payoff is. Normally I don't like very expensive skills, but the cost reduction and her kit kind of makes it so that her EX ability is actually a pretty usable ability. You can easily get this off multiple times in a fight. This skill is probably one of the skills you should level up first, especially when using Cherino. Her trash clearing capabilities are second to none. Moving on to her normal skill. Cherino's normal skill targets an enemy with the highest attack stat. Cherino then applies a focused fire debuff, which makes it so that your students are more likely to attack that target and also lowers their critical hit resistance. This debuff is applied every 40 seconds and lasts 15 seconds. So this ability is probably my favorite ability out of the skills Cherino has. The critical resistance reduction makes it so that you have a more comfortable time clearing, let's say, total assault fights. Personally, I would probably max this skill out first, and it's probably Cherino's best ability. Moving on to her passive skill, Cherino's passive increases her base attack. Normally this ability is really nice to have, but considering the low amount of attack Cherino has, and her equipment which does not have a lot of attack, Cherino's damage isn't really that high. So this skill really just makes up for her lack of attack. Skilling wise, I would probably level this skill last, because the extra attack isn't really necessary, especially when you can get more benefits from her other abilities. Moving on to Cherino's sub-skill. This ability increases Cherino's cost recovery by 269 to 511. This cost recovery is further increased by 77 to 146 based on the amount of Red Winter students in your party. The further increase has a maximum benefit of 3 students, and Cherino is not included in this. In my opinion, this skill is really nice to have. The cost recovery really helps you get her EX skills off more often. Considering that though, her normal skill and her EX skill are probably a higher priority. Those abilities just help you so much more than this ability. Yes, the increased cost recovery is nice to have, but students like, well, Shun exists, right? If you really need cost, she's nice to have, but if you have Shun, I would rather use her over Cherino for cost. So that being said, I would level this ability 3rd just because her normal skill and her EX are just that much more powerful. Cherino is an AoE damage monster and a really strong supportive character. She excels at clearing out waves of enemies and debuffing tough targets so that you can deal significant damage to take them out faster. She shines in heavy armored stages such as EXP commissions and total assault stages such as Chaste and Bina, but you could also consider her in stages like Shirokuro. Her normal skill debuff is probably the most amazing skill to have, and her cost recovery is a nice addition to her kit. For those of you pulling for Cherino, I wish you luck. She is such a useful character. And Moustache Lady, Moustache Lady, Moustache Lady.
ひげのついた雪だるまを作ろう。世界で一番大きい雪だるまにしようじゃないか。カムラと。いた。やったな。よーし、その挑戦受けて立つぞ、カムラと。
Now let's move on to the second Red Winter student we will be getting. That student is Nodoka. She is a student that does not arrive in the gacha, but rather the Red Winter event. You can obtain her by farming the event and she will be a base 1-star student. Nodoka is a 1-star special combat class character who is a backline supporter. Nodoka is an explosion damage type character with heavy armor. Her terrain affinities are B rank in all outdoors, urban, and indoors, meaning you can use her without any real demerit in all content of the game. She uses a submachine gun and is equipped with gloves, a hairpin, and the trusty support necklace. If you plan to use Nodoka, the necklace is probably the most important piece of gear you should upgrade on her because it will affect her debuffs. Nodoka's EX skill is a 3-cost ability that creates an area of effect. Allies in this area are given an increased accuracy buff for 25.2 to 47.9%. This buff lasts 30 seconds. While normally buff abilities seem really nice to have, the only time an accuracy increase is really active is during PvP. PvE stages generally don't have an accuracy issue, so the problem is that this ability isn't really useful for PvE. That may change later on when more stages have higher evasion stat, but currently this ability is probably one of the least useful abilities to have. At most, I would level this ability to 3 just because getting to EX level 3 is generally pretty cheap, but this ability is probably just going to be a future reference for now. Moving on to Nodoka's normal skill. Nodoka damages an enemy, dealing 221 to 421% damage to one enemy. This skill reduces their evasion by 17.7 to 33.7%. This debuff lasts 20 seconds while the damage portion happens every 25 seconds. Again, Nodoka's abilities deal with evasion and accuracy. The problem with this ability is the debuff isn't really useful for anything again besides PvP. This one, however, is probably targeted towards Tsubaki's high evasion. The real problem though is that because of how this ability works, there is no real set condition for how she targets the enemy with her debuff, so it might not always hit Tsubaki. However, the upside is that this ability is just a free nuke. This ability, even though the debuff is kind of whatever, at least it does damage. At 2 stars, Nodoka unlocks her passive ability. This skill increases her accuracy by 14 to 26.6%. While normally I ignore abilities such as this, it is important to point out that special class characters give about 10% of their stats to all the strikers in your party, so this skill is actually a skill I would consider leveling probably 3rd, mainly because her sub-skill is a bit better than her passive skill, but this is also a skill you can consider. And lastly, at 3 star, Nodoka unlocks her sub-skill. This ability increases accuracy for all her allies by 9.1 to 17.3%. This skill is probably the most useful ability, and I would probably level this ability first over all the other abilities. Probably the normal skill second, passive skill third, and her EX skill last. Since Nodoka is mainly a free character, this is probably for people who struggle against Tsubaki in PvP. The problem with this skill is that when you have to 3-star Nodoka and it does the same thing as Mashiro's sub-skill, they are both an accuracy buff, so these skills won't stack with each other. If you're thinking about putting Nodoka and Mashiro in the same team just to counter Tsubaki, one of them is probably good enough. Nodoka's a character solely focused on increasing your party's accuracy while reducing the enemy's evasion. Her usefulness at the current state of the game is rather low due to the accuracy needed in stages. She really just shines in PvP, mainly because there's a specific shield lady that, dodges everything for some reason. The other problem with Nodoka is she is a special class student, so this means that she competes with powerful special type characters such as Serena, Hibiki, and Karin, to name a few. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, please subscribe, have a nice day, and bye bye.